2 scopes, 1 to 8. That's $400. Let's go.
Atibal Optics is a relatively new player in the optics market, and here we have the first 1 to 8. It's in a 10-inch 30mm tube. It weighs around 17 ounces. It does come with its own throw lever, which is nice, and its own 30mm mount. As to what's inside, the reticle is quite different, and then it's built for fast shooting with a precise 0.5 MOA aiming point and BDC hash marks, and it's all powered by a 2032 battery. Now that we've gone over the specs, let's see how this thing really works.
One of the things that's really nice about this scope is it actually gives you a little more value for your money. That comes in an included scope mount and included zoom lever. So the scope mount is pretty nice. It's a QD mount with 2 latches, and there are locking latches, so you can't bump it open. But one thing that I found out was, even though the rear latch seemed to work pretty well, where you have a spring-loaded mechanism where you push it through, you adjust this little nut, then you pull it through the other way and latch it shut. The front latch here would come loose even though I had it very tight, and I made sure that the nut was aligned properly. So not sure what's going on there, but it seemed to be walking out. Up from there we have on the actual scope, we have the brightness adjustment knob. Feels like the Primary Arms. It's a 1 to 11 with no off switches in between. It's very stiff, not very stiff, like it's easy to turn, but stiff enough that you won't bump it off. All right, batteries under the cap there on the brightness adjustment knob. And then you have the scope turrets. These look exactly the same as the ones on the Primary Arms. It looks like they came out of the same factory. They're relatively simple, but they do have very nice positive clicks. And again, they're capped so you won't bump them in your bag. And then back from there, we have a very nice to turn zoom lever. It feels even a little bit easier to turn than the Primary Arms. Again, about 180-degree rotation, and with the included screw-in optional knurled knob. This is your zoom lever that's included in the box. Makes it really easy to turn back and forth. As far as glass quality goes, I think this is a huge upgrade as far as budget scopes are concerned. You saw the Vortex Strike Eagle in our 1 to 6 Ultimate 1 to 6 video. And that one definitely had not the greatest glass, right? Some discoloration. This thing is really clear. It's really clear to look through, right? And even the field of view is relatively open. It's not the tightest, it's not the most open, but it's nice and it doesn't discolor anything. It's really clear. In the center of the reticle with the diopter adjusted, we get a really clear picture. But then out from there, there's kind of a little bit of a bubbly fisheye effect as you get near the edges. And also there's a little bit of out of focus blur that bands around the edges of the scope. From there, the eye box at 1x is pretty good. Again, it's not the tightest and it's not the most open, but it's definitely workable, especially if you have good fundamentals, mounting the rifle in your shoulder. How about the reticle? So the first things first is the brightness. This thing, versus the Primary Arms, which does get a little red during the day. To be honest, this thing does not get red during the day. It essentially has 11 night vision settings. During the day, you're going to be running it black. So one of the things that actually helps with that is that there are 2 horizontal lines that come off the center with hashes, and essentially those are not that useful for anything other than drawing your eye to that center of the dot quickly, because you have more stuff to focus on. And then we have this thick diamond around the center dot. The center dot's really nice size. It does help you pick it up, but if you're shooting a precise shot at certain distances where you want to hold dead on, say like 25 to 50 yards, then it can get in the way a little bit.
Now we've seen this at close range, let's take a look at how this holds up at long range by taking a closer look at the reticle. Unlike the ACSS, there are no wind holds. You have to rely on your impacts to judge hold off. If we plug in our numbers in the Strelic, this is what it tells us for drops. So let's see how it actually works out.
200. Hit. 300. Hit. 350.
Primary Arms is one of the first companies to bring budget-priced optics to the market. I first looked at the 1:6 version of the scope back in 2014, and given that there's a new gen now, it's always a good idea to see what's changed. So first looking at the specs, you find very many similarities. Still 17 ounces, it fits into a 10-inch 30mm tube, so it's also powered by a 2032 battery with an extra one in its cap, and it's got a second focal plane ACSS horseshoe reticle with a BDC and a ranging reticle on man-sized targets. Now that we've gone over the specs, let's see how this thing really works. So as far as mounting it, you guys know that I prefer lightweight mounts, and in this video we're using the Night Force ultralight mount, which comes in about 5.7 ounces, so it actually helps to keep the weight down on the gun. On the left side of the gun, this is the brightness knob. The brightness knob is actually tactile and it does not move easily between the 11 levels. Note there is no off level between each of the 11 levels. Right next to the brightness knob are the adjustment caps. They're capped, which is a good thing, and one is a little bit larger than the other, so you don't mess them up. On the rear of the scope, this is the zoom lever. There is no scope lever included with the scope, but there is a little raised fin that you can use, but although in this video I've chosen to use a cheap universal scope mount, which actually makes turning the scope a lot easier. You don't really need that much because the actual travel from 1 to 8 is very smooth. It's about 180 degrees, so shooting from short to long, it makes it very, very easy. The scope comes in about 17 ounces, so it's about medium weight. With that and the scope mount itself, it doesn't add that much weight to the gun, so when you're running and gunning, it actually makes a pretty decent medium weight package. In the latest model, I can definitely tell that the glass has gotten a lot better. The previous one was kind of brownish to look through, but this one's actually very clear to look through. It's probably not as clear as the Burst XTR2 or like the Vortex PST. It's not up to that level, but it's just below that level. So you can adjust some of the fisheye with the diopter, and just as we mentioned on the other Atibal scope, the center is clear. Toward the edges a little bit blurrier, but when you're shooting at 1x, you don't really notice it, and it's just fine. So you'll be very happy, I think, with the glass quality on this scope. On the brightness, I think at the max level at 11, you can notice the reticle turning from black to red, but it's more like a maroon red. I would probably just only turn on illumination during dusk or twilight conditions, because it's definitely not what we call daylight bright as far as red dot bright, but it does help just a little bit, especially if you're shooting against a white target. The reticle design itself at 1x, this doesn't have any lines coming in. Like the reticle just has two dots, but the center reticle is a horseshoe, helping the center on the target is a little bit bigger, I think, than the EOTech 65 MOA. If you're running with illumination off, you have no problem finding this reticle on 1x. Now that we've seen this thing in close range, let's talk about how this thing holds up at long range by taking a closer look at the reticle. From the manual, we can see the list of BDC drops using a recommended 100-yard zero. Also seen in the low right corner of this reticle is its unique ranging reticle for deriving distance to a man-sized targets. If we plug in our numbers in the Strelic, this is what it tells us for drops. So let's see how it actually works out.
200. Hit. 300. Hit. 350.
Okay, fellas, that's it for the comparison. Just to summarize, if you were to choose the Atibal scope, probably the best reason to choose it is it has better value since it has included scope lever mount and it has included scope mount. On the Primary Arms ACSS side, the key differentiator is it has a better reticle, I think, with ranging capabilities, and the brightness is a little bit brighter than the Atibal. So what we call daylight red, not exactly daylight bright, but daylight red. But the biggest thing is they have a lot more in common than they have as far as distinguishing features. So they have the same body, they essentially have the same controls, their glass quality is the same, and they have similar price points. So that's it, fellas. Hope you found this comparison useful. If you find this video useful, please like, comment, and subscribe, and visit us on Facebook as well. Lastly, if you're looking for ammo, check out our sponsor, Impact Ammo. A discount code is available in the description below along with all other equipment. We'll see you next time.